Self-pity doesn't show up wearing a trench coat and dramatic music. It usually shows up quietly. It shows up as a thought like, yeah, that figures. Or, of course, that happened to me. Or, I already know how this goes. Nothing explosive. That's why it's easy to miss. Most people think self-pity looks like whining or sulking. In reality, it often looks like being realistic, being tired, being cautious, being done trying for now. And that's what makes it dangerous. Self-pity feels warm. Not emotionally warm, psychologically warm. It reduces pressure. It gives you a reason to pause without calling it quitting. You're not giving up. You're just taking a step back. You're just being honest. You're just not forcing things. All of that sounds reasonable. The warmth comes from what self-pity removes. It removes urgency. It removes responsibility. It removes the uncomfortable question of what do I do next. When you're in self-pity, nothing is required of you. No decisions, no exposure, no chance of failing again today. Your nervous system loves that, and it makes sense. After effort doesn't pay off, your brain is trying to protect you from wasting more energy. Self-pity is one of its favorite tools. The problem is that the protection doesn't come with a timer. What starts as a short rest quietly becomes a habit. Here's the key distinction most people miss. Pain is automatic. Self-pity is optional. The event isn't optional. The disappointment isn't optional. The frustration isn't optional. But the internal loop that follows the replaying, the explaining, the settling in, that part is learned. Self-pity is not sadness. Sadness moves through you. Self-pity builds furniture. It gives pain a place to sit. And once pain is sitting comfortably, it starts talking. It narrates. It explains. It connects dots. It builds a story where effort is risky and stillness feels smart. That's why self-pity often sounds intelligent. It uses logic. It uses evidence. It pulls receipts from your past. Last time, this didn't work. Remember how that ended? You already know how people are. It's not emotional. It's persuasive. And that persuasion slowly changes how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone experimenting and adjusting. You start seeing yourself as someone waiting for conditions to improve. Waiting feels mature. It feels patient. It feels controlled. But waiting is only useful if something external is actually changing. Most of the time, nothing is. Another reason self-pity sticks around is that it creates moral credit. If you've been disappointed, you feel justified slowing down. You've earned rest. You've earned distraction. You've earned a break from trying so hard. Short term, that's fine. Long term, it quietly shifts your identity. You stop asking, what can I change? And start asking, why does this keep happening to me? That question feels deep. It feels reflective. It feels productive. It usually isn't, because it points backward. Self-pity has a time bias. It makes the past feel larger than the future. The past is familiar. The future requires effort and uncertainty. So the mind lingers where it feels competent, analyzing what already happened. Thus comfortable, warm again. Here's another layer people don't talk about. Self-pity gives you energy without action. When you dwell on unfairness, your brain releases stress hormones. Those hormones don't just make you tense. They make you feel alert, focused, righteous. That's why people can sit in self-pity for hours without getting bored. It feels like doing something, but nothing is actually moving. Over time, this has a cost that sneaks up on you. You start breaking small promises to yourself. You delay things you said you'd do. You get to it tomorrow. Eventually, you stop trusting your own plans because you trained yourself to stay still. Confidence doesn't disappear from lack of belief. It disappears from lack of follow-through. Self-pity erodes confidence by teaching you that pausing is the default response to friction. So what's the alternative? Not pretending things don't hurt. Not forcing optimism. Not powering through. The alternative is cold clarity. Cold clarity is simple. Not easy, simple. Cold clarity says, this didn't work. What changes now? No identity, no narrative, no moral scorekeeping. Just adjustment. Cold clarity feels uncomfortable at first because it removes the padding. You don't get the emotional reward of explanation. You don't get to sit in the story. You have to stand up mentally. Here's a practical way to tell which mode you're in. Ask yourself one question. What behavior does this situation require? Not what you feel, not what you deserve, not what should have happened. What does it require? If you can't answer that, you're probably still in self-pity. Clarity always produces a behavior, even a small one. Send the message. Change the approach. Stop doing the thing that isn't working. Lower the scope. Increase the reps. Try again differently. Movement doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be real. And here's the underrated part. Once you move, the warmth fades on its own. You don't have to fight self-pity directly. You starve it by acting. Self-pity can't survive momentum. It needs stillness. That's why action, even boring action, works better than motivation. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to believe in yourself. You need to replace explanation with execution. Self-pity says, stay here. You've been through enough. Clarity says, we'll figure it out while moving. Warmth feels safe, but momentum is what actually gets you out. Not fast, not dramatically, just forward.